Hello and welcome everyone, a new episode of Money Means Business. Of course, we are going to take a quick look at the most important economic events which took place in the past 7 days, but the lion's share of this episode is going to be dedicated to the economic results of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's African tour, which took him to 3 African countries. Right after the short break, we are going to return back with more, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Let's start immediately as we do have a lot to speak about and a lot to analyze. We are very much delighted to have with us my dear guest live here in the studio, His Excellency Ambassador Ayoub Mahmoud Ayoub, former Minister Commercial. Thank you very much for being with us, sir.
Thank you and good evening to you and to the viewers.
Sir, a very important African tour took place this week. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi just returned yesterday from Mozambique. Mozambique, it was the last leg in the three-state African tour. It took him to Angola first, then Zambia, and the third leg it was in Mozambique. And in Zambia, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi addressed the COMESA summit and handed the presidency of the COMESA to the Zambian president. And of course, the head of a state wished the Zambian president the best of luck. And he expressed also confidence that the Zambian president and the Zambian leadership to the COMESA in general is going to exert the utmost efforts for the best interest of the African bloc. But let's talk about the most important points which were tackled in the speech of the president in front of the COMESA gathering. It was under the slogan of COMESA economic integration, focusing on green investment, added value, and tourism. Let's take it word by word. Economic integration. How do you see economic integration among African countries and its importance right now, particularly amid the global economic crises, not crisis?
economic integration between African countries is the most important axis, if we can say, which we should focus on. And that's why President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has highlighted it. Economic integration between African countries means that there is value addition in all sectors of life in the African continents. I'll give you an example. We import copper from Switzerland, which does not produce copper, while it is produced in Zambia. So economic integration means direct relationship between the African countries and increasing the inner trade, if we can say, between the African countries. This is one thing. Other thing is that we are all speaking about green industries and the green energy. We have the raw material or the ingredients or the components we need so that it is economical. We are speaking about economy of scale.
Okay.
Yes. To be economical, it should be between more than two countries. So we have seen that when we are exporting electricity to Saudi Arabia and to Jordan and to other countries. And also when we are coming to African countries, there is a lot which Egypt and the African countries can gain when they cooperate together more strongly and more deeply than before. That is why President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi highlighted economic integration between African countries, which is beneficial, mutually beneficial.
Win-win situation, but
it is a win-win, yes.
Let's analyze this more, or to shed more light on that, and or to know how to implement this on the ground. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was keen to speak about the importance of developing infrastructure, and to have infrastructure, developing the infrastructure as one of the main priorities to reach this goal. Sustainable development among African states for reaching this win-win situation.
Sustainable development. When we speak about infrastructure, Egypt can give a very good example because during the last 6 or 7 or 8 years, we have established strong infrastructure in Egypt. But its importance comes to shed light on it when we are speaking of infrastructure in other African countries. One of the main problems African countries are facing is that the infrastructure is not complete.
Okay.
That's one thing. Other thing is that when we are speaking about exports, for example, from Zambia or from African countries to Egypt or vice versa, we speak about the transportation. Transportation cannot go smooth without the right infrastructure. That is the ports and roads and undergrounds and so on. So infrastructure in the African countries is complementary to economic development or sustainable development, or it is, I can say, to the backbone of any sustainable development in African countries. It should take the infrastructure as a base for taking off to economic development. This is one thing. Other thing is that when we look to African countries, they were separated for political reasons during the last century, if we can say that.
Yeah.
In this century, they came to the conclusion that to be stronger, they have to be together.
Yeah.
That is a very important point. Together we are stronger. Together we can go further. Maybe alone we can go quicker, but together we can go further. That is a very important. It applies to individuals, to countries, and to the continent as a whole. That is why when President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi gave the presidency to the president of Zambia, he gave him a successful mission completed, which should be completed by followed up by the Zambian
to
president.
continue on the ground. I mean, there are there are managerial issues, if I may say so, and when it comes to management, crisis management, amendment of many rules which were put, for example, whenever we signed memoranda of understanding or agreements, but these memoranda needs a kind of amendment throughout the way. We are flexible enough to do whatever it calls for the best interest of both sides.
Luckily, Egypt has not only it is a chartering member to the COMESA, but also it has bilateral agreements with most of the COMESA countries. And I will say most of the African countries, whether COMESA in the east or the countries in the west or in South Africa. So Egypt has a lot to offer to African countries and a lot to benefit from more cooperation with African countries.
This is something which we are going to discuss or to
Yes.
shed more light on that. But of course, COMESA stands for Common Market of the East and South of Africa. Sir, trade relations between Egypt and COMESA countries were estimated at $3.4 billion, as Egypt is keen on encouraging more investments. How do you see this number, $3.4 billion? I mean, can I say that this should be considered only as a start, and it's a long journey, and we can double or even triple this amount of money?
Just a start. We can triple this figure. Why I say that? Because I am working in marketing, and I know very well about African countries where I was posted for in 2 of these African countries. So I can say I'm well versed in the economies of the African countries. There is a lot, I say a lot, to do between African countries together. We need to know each other better in a better way. The capabilities which African countries have, the opportunities which are there for the African countries to come together and produce together and have more cooperation as far as in energy, in infrastructure, in trade, in transfer of technology, in experience in education, and all these areas. Egypt has a lot to do and to offer Africa. It's a good model for African countries to see what Egypt is doing successfully in many of these sectors. When they see, I can say this, just to see, it is just a beginning. The second step should be there, what we can do together, not alone. When we speak about the countries of African, $3.4 billion, I said it can be tripled because I see the total exports of the African countries, within this framework of the total exports, we can triple this 3.4 within just a few years. Let us say within 5 years, if the concerned officials, those who are doing the business, sit together and see how can we divert what we call diversion of trade, divert divert trade to be in between African countries instead of between African countries and other countries of the world. It is an important point for the African countries to come together to know how best can we serve our mutual interests. As you mentioned, it is a win-win situation for each and every country to come to Egypt and to come to the COMESA, of course, to see how best can we serve our goal of tripling the inter-trade between the COMESA countries, and also to look to other blocks in Africa, in the West Africa, because it is another block which there can be, luckily we have trade agreements or bilateral agreements and memorandums of understanding and many protocols with these countries. Egypt, I speak about Egypt in this respect. So there is a lot we can do together, and the COMESA, luckily Egypt was present for the last 1 full year, and they gave them a very good example and many areas which were
We are going to discuss this also as
Yes.
the press conference which took place between President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and his Mozambican counterpart Filipe Nyusi in the capital
In Maputo,
Maputo
yes.
yesterday. He mentioned a lot of these points or these issues, not only related to Mozambique, but to many other African countries. But before going to that, since we were speaking before being on air, you were working in Somalia for a certain period of time, and also just 2 days ago, in this summit of COMESA, Somalia returned back, as the National Army of Somalia did such a great job to continue facing and battling terrorism presented there by Al Shabaab terrorist group affiliated to Al Qaeda. How do you see Somalia as one of the important countries with its strategic location, and what it can add to the COMESA?
I like to shed more light on Somalia. Somalia is a rich country with resources. I know they have they have mineral resources, uranium, cattle and sheep, banana, and pompilium, with that's grapefruit. So they have a lot of agricultural and animal products, which are the mainstay of the, and the minerals, of course, which are the mainstay of the Somali economy. Somalia was distracted after Siad Berri, where I've been posted during the time of Siad Berri, and I've seen there is a lot which Egypt can do as far as Somalia, specifically Somalia.
Okay.
Yes, why I say that? Because during my posting to Somalia, Egypt, exported for the first time medicines, pharmaceutical products to Somalia. Egypt, during my posting there, I speak about Egypt, not about myself, of course, exported tires, car tires to Somalia. Medicines and car tires for the first time, and they paid in dollars. This means that Egypt can offer a lot as far as the Somali market is concerned. And at the same time, there is a lot. We import meat. We import bovine meat or cattle and sheep, whether frozen or cut, and we have seen the aeroplanes coming from Khartoum every day with fresh meat from Khartoum, from Sudan. This can be repeated with Somalia, and in the case of Somalia, the airplanes which you go to Somalia should be loaded with Egyptian products which they already import at higher cost from other countries.
Yep.
This is an important point. So we make economies of scale as far as what we can export and import at the same time. And in this case, Somalia have Mogadishu port, and also there is Mombasa, which is in Dar es Salaam. But Mogadishu port can handle most, or I can say all, of the imports and export of Egypt as far as Somalia is concerned. So there is a lot which you can do with specifically Somalia for trade considerations, strategic considerations, and political considerations.
And this is such a good example of Arab-Africa integration, or Afro-Arab integration.
Afro-Arab integration, beneficial to both parties. When I say beneficial to both parties, because I know for sure that Somalia can gain a lot from cooperation with Egypt. They were cooperating with Egypt in many fields, not only in political field or military field and economic field, but even in education. We sent to Somalia teachers. We sent, Al-Azhar had a mission in Mogadishu and in Hargeisa in the north. So there is a lot. When we come to Somalia, I like that we explore and begin from today, not from tomorrow, to find our way again in Somalia. And the new Prime Minister of Somalia is a successful man, because he increased the national product to about 17, the foreign exchange to $17 billion, which is phenomenal in a country like Somalia, which was almost, how we say, complete destruction, everything. Now, within a couple of years, they have $17 billion of foreign reserves. This means,
if it was not the disputes, the struggles, the terrorism, drought was eating Somalia. Let's be accurate.
Yes. Okay.
Let's return back to the African tour of the president, and there are things in common between the speech of President Sisi and what he has said with his Mozambican counterpart in the press conference. Peace and security. Of course, they are to be achieved with the security solution, or with fighting terrorism in the security way, if I may say so. But fighting terrorism with construction and development, this is another issue, and this is another way with which Egypt succeeded in its fight against terrorism. And this is exactly what the president said when he said that we can, of course, collaborate together, coordinate efforts together, but to take both into consideration. It's not only the security solution, it's construction and development.
To defuse terrorism, you have to create development plan and the people touch and feel it and enjoy it. When we are speaking about sustainable development in Egypt until the year 2030, and when we are cooperating with the African countries for another area in sustainable development, so we are diffusing the ground where the terrorism is. Why there is terrorism? In most cases, they exploit the privation of people and the jobless and all this thing. We know that. And they build on it. When we make development with the African countries, and Egypt can give a good example in that respect, from security point of view, from economic point of view, and the African countries can learn a lot when they see Egypt, when we have seen in the year 2012, 2013, the situation in Egypt
Since
was
the
not.
70s.
Yes.
Since the 70s. It's not only what happened in 10 or 15 years since the
Yes.
70s.
We suffered a lot.
We suffered
but
a lot.
we succeeded by the sustainable development which we created. The infrastructure which absorbs manpower, absorbs employment, increases or decreases unemployment. So there is a lot which you can do together, and when it comes to the terrorism and versus development, Egypt and the African countries has a lot to gain
President
from
Sisi
development.
said it, and then more than once, by the way, but last but not least, it was in yesterday's press conference. Terrorism depends on three main pillars:
Yes.
poverty,
Bob.
ignorance, spoiled religious discourse. And when you fix the three, then you are going easily to get rid of all the terrorism factors, or these were the factors to lead to terrorism or extremist ideologies and stuff like that. We are ready to help with missions from Al-Azhar and our dear Coptic Church.
Yes.
We are ready for vocational training to qualify cadres to lead the economic future of any African country. And last but not least, to have this win-win situation to boost the trade exchange, investment opportunities, engaging in full cooperation with the private sector. What should be the priorities? I mean, if I want to arrange them,
If
would
you
you
want
please
to
arrange them
them,
for me?
I will say something which raising awareness.
Number
When
one.
we raise awareness of the people of what is the best way to live and to cooperate and to combat terrorism, and poverty will not be combated by words but by work. When we raise awareness of the people that to have a better living conditions, you have to work according to these rules. So raising awareness is very important as far as combating terrorism and combating also ignorance and illiteracy, will I say. In many cases we find that the illiterate people are prone to be manipulated by the terrorists and extremists. That is another area which is very important. So when I say raising awareness and taking action, raise awareness and take action is a motto which, if we can do it now, and we have to do it now, not tomorrow, as I always say, because there is a lot which we benefit and gain together by cooperating in the many fields of economy, infrastructure, industry, technology transfer, and vocational training. There is a lot Egypt which can do as far as vocational training is concerned with African countries who are emerging. There is another factor, the new generation and women. When you say new generation and women, this is more than 50% of the manpower of the population. So this segment was not, I will not say it was ignored, but was not given due consideration. Because
No, it was neglected. It was neglected, and with what we have seen with financial inclusion, with taking into consideration that whenever we're giving the chance to youth and women, they can achieve miracles.
A lot.
And this is something which should be conveyed to other countries as a role model. Sir, raising awareness, you mentioned a very important topic, which is raising awareness in all fields. And I don't know if it's right to say that or no, raising awareness with our potentials, with our treasures, with our wealth as Africa. Because in my humble opinion, many African states till the moment are suffering soft colonialism. It's not the colonialism with troops, with armies, with stuff like that.
Not anymore.
It's soft colonialism with some countries who are very much clever to take all the wealth or all the treasures or the raw materials, all the that treasures many African countries really have and enjoy, and that to manufacture them there and then to return back with exporting these products to the very same African countries. And I think that this one of the main reasons behind this presidential directive all the time, localizing industry, feel the importance of the raw materials we have. No more exporting phosphate. No, it's going to turn into fertilizers and then it's going to be exported. And this is only an example. Do we have this awareness in our African states right now or not yet?
I said create awareness. Why I say create awareness? Because we don't have it. We don't
Till the
have
moment?
We don't have enough of it.
Enough, okay.
We don't have enough of it.
Okay.
Let us be in a mild way. We don't have enough awareness.
Yeah.
Because in many cases, the business community in some African countries are attached to the past colonial powers. They are attached to them for economic considerations. But when they find
Algeria, France, Morocco, Spain,
Yes,
Mozambique, Portugal, you name it.
see, and
This is
Angola
a fact which we should
Angola
confess.
also.
Yes.
And the president has been also to Angola, and I'm very
Yes.
pleased that he has been to Angola. When he has been to Angola, Windhoek, this means that this part of West African countries, we are creating new bridges of cooperation. When I say cooperation, it is not political, it is economic. Because economy means business, means money for the people of Angola and of Egypt, of course. So when we are creating awareness of the necessity and the existence, our existence depends on creating awareness of what we can do together with African countries, especially in economic field, which President is focusing on, and also give them a good example what has been achieved during the last year when he was the president of the Commerce. So
And in 2019, when we were the president of the AU, the African
before that,
Union.
yes.
Yes.
So 2 consecutive presidents of the African unions, if I can say, or African groupings, gave the African countries a better opportunity, and Egypt, of course, to know more about what we can do together, what we can offer to African countries, and at the same time we are going to win a lot. Instead of importing, I mentioned the copper, for example, there is a lot of other things. I spoke
Sure.
about also about the meat, for example. When we speak about Somalia, there is a lot which
Somalia, Chad,
Yes.
South Sudan, Sudan,
There is a
you
lot.
name it.
There is
The
a lot.
fields there, the land, it's very
Fertile.
very, very fertile. I mean, and it's virgin Africa.
It is
Sir,
very-
this is something which reminded me of, in my also humble opinion, a very smart note by the president yesterday when he spoke about what one of the Egyptian companies is doing in Tanzania, Julius Nyereri's Dam.
Yes.
And to what extent it's really obvious in deeds, not in words, that
Indeed.
Egypt is not against the development of any country. On the contrary, vice versa. We are building Julius Nyereri's Dam in Tanzania because this is going to benefit Tanzania. And so we do have all the right to say that what's going on in Ethiopia and their stance regarding the so-called Ethiopian dam, which is against our national security, our national water security, it's something which we will not accept.
It is unacceptable, and Egypt will have its way to handle it, and I'm sure of that. At the same time,
By the way, we're watching now on the screen
Yes.
Julius Nyereri's dam. And
it is something very, very interesting that Egypt is building.
yes,
Egypt is always building good relations, and on the ground when they see that the dam was constructed by the Egyptian engineers and workers, this is a good example. Egypt is building bridges of cooperation with African countries. If we come to the Renaissance dam in Ethiopia, it is political issue, mainly political issue, to try to pressure Egypt in some way or other. And Egypt will have its way in handling it in the right time and in the right way.
Whatever it costs.
Yes.
Sir, also, you know, it made me very proud to know, for example, that our dear former Prime Minister Engineer Ibrahim Mahlab is one of the national heroes in Congo and Rwanda, for example.
Yes, in African countries.
Yes, and to see a sign on the headquarters of many of the foreign ministries in these countries made or constructed by the Arab constructors or Al-Muqawwilun Al-Arab of Egypt. Now, this is to say also again and again that Egypt is there in Africa in deeds, not in words, and we are going to be very much happy to give a hand to support.
Or resume, yes.
If you want to elaborate on that.
Egypt has done a lot in African countries. As you mentioned, Arab contractors or Muqawwilun Al-Arab, their presence is quite seen and felt and enjoyed by many African countries. So we have the experience and you can repeat it again in these African countries and in other African countries. When we focus on the commercial countries, then we can create a new facts on the ground that Egypt has a lot to do and is willing to do and is able and willing to do. And during the President Fattah al-Sisi for the COMESA and before that for African Union, it gave them a good example of what we can do together for their own benefit. And at the same time, Egypt is, because we have manpower issues, we have resources issues, we have infrastructure issues. In all of these areas, we have given a good example. What did we do as far as infrastructure, for example? We have done a lot. Egypt has done
mega national projects, 1.5 million fedans to reclaim them, whether in Toshka or the New Delta. The the fourth generation of smart cities, you name it. But also, I want to mention, on the sidelines of the COMESA summit, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met with Kenyan and Malawi counterparts. And they also spoke about investment, trade, exchange of trade, boosting the volume of trade among all of them. And of course, this means that it's Nile Basin countries, Middle African countries, Southwest African countries. And this is to say that this is the way Egypt returned back to Africa, to consider Africa as our strategic depth and to continue with boosting our economic ties with all African states without discrimination.
You said it. Africa is our strategic depth. Why we say that? Because from economic point of view, from strategic point of view, when we see what is happening, how we are creating more areas of cooperation with the 9 basin countries, in Kenya, for example, in Tanzania, in Rwanda, and in Malawi. And there is a lot when we come to Kenya. Kenya is fairly developed compared to Tanzania, for example. Why? Because there is the business there is depending on mainly on tourism. Mainly on tourism. They have a lot of safari, and they can also they can also cooperate with Egypt as far as tourism is concerned. It happens in many cases that people come to Cairo and then go to Nairobi to continue their flight, and there are direct flights between Cairo and Nairobi. So there is a lot to speak about the air traffic between the two countries and all the maritime lines between Alexandria or Suez or Port Said and the East African ports of Mombasa and Mogadishu. So, and also Eritrea also. There is a lot which we can do when cooperating together, and they come to the conclusion, African countries now, that they are looking towards Cairo for support and for cooperation and for more cooperation and mutually beneficial relationship between them and between Cairo. Thanks to the presidency of President Fattah al-Sisi and also to what Arab contractors have
And
done
to
in
to
these countries.
continue on the same track, to build on what we have achieved already, not every time to start from scratch. You would find summit talks between the presidents, I mean the political leaderships, ministerial meetings, businessmen meetings, joint press conferences among the chambers of commerce between us and other countries. How do you see also the inclusion of the private sector in relatively new markets? I mean, green hydrogen,
Private
green
sector.
energy, you name it. I mean, new markets, new fields, new
You-
horizons of
you said
cooperation, I
private
mean.
sector.
Yeah.
When I see what the Egyptian private sector have done for and in Uganda,
For example.
I am very proud. I am proud of what they have done. It is a very good example of what the Egyptian private sector can do for Uganda and at the same time for Egypt. This is a good example. So it is something which is running until today and tomorrow, inshallah. So we have a good example, practical example, what can be done with the African countries of what we have done. In Tanzania recently, this dam, and also the Egyptian private sector, they have done a lot. In Uganda, it was a mutually beneficial situation, as you like to call it, win-win situation, which they are winning. The Uganda is winning, and there is a consideration which we cannot ignore. When Egypt is cooperating with the African countries, it does not have political, let us say, maneuvers.
Yeah.
Or it has political aims behind the economic.
Among lines,
Yes.
intentions.
There is nothing like that.
Yes.
When other countries, I will not name or say the names, when they are going to Somalia or Kenya or Ghana or whatever, they have political between the lines goals. This is not the case with Egypt. Even during the time of Gamal Abdel Nasser or later on through the Arab contracts, they have seen that Egyptians, will I say, do not have these political orientations to utilize or exploit any situation. This is something which we should highlight in our endeavors to increase cooperation with African countries. Egypt is there for a mutually
Sir,
beneficial
one final
relationship.
question. Have we learned the lesson that we can achieve miracles when we cooperate? That together we can do things which we have never dreamed of, or still there are some greedy sides which wanna all the time, it's only me. It's not us, it's me. It's not I, it's we. Which is which?
We. Why? Because we can go further.
Yes.
As I mentioned, we or together we can go further. I can go quicker, but not that further, not that far. But we can go further. When I say we can go further, this means that we are all benefiting from coming together and going in the same road of development, sustainable development together. And this is a conclusion which many African presidents have came to. We need to cooperate more with the African countries, and there are no hidden agendas for Egypt in this country.
No hidden
this must be
agendas.
clear.
We
It must be clear.
cooperating together is the key word, it's the secret, and inshallah it's going to be implemented on the ground with tangible results. As my dear guest said, as I prefer to say it, it's always going to be a win-win situation. Egypt,
Yes.
Africa. Well, sir, as usual, I enjoyed my time.
Same
And you
to
are
me.
always an added value to our programs.
Thank you.
We were very much delighted to have with us live here in the studio my dear guest, His Excellency Ambassador Ayoub Mahmoud Ayoub, former Minister Commercial.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, we are going now to take a quick look at the most important economic events which took place in the past 7 days. And by this, we come to the end of this episode of Money Means Business. Till we meet again, same time on Nile TV International. Many thanks for watching. With all my love, this was Nermina Abdurrahman.